Hello and welcome to this edition of Going Public. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker. We are so very glad to have you with us, and we're also very glad to have with us Mr. Dwayne Bourgeois once again. Dwayne, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having us.
All right, of course, Executive Director of the North Lafourche Levee District. And, you know, it's one of those things where you guys spend a lot of time and energy working on so many different projects, and we've spent a lot of time talking about the projects. But I think we really need to kind of stay focused on maybe some of these changes that are coming with this this flood insurance concepts, right?
Yeah, I think that what we were hoping to do today, and I mean, it's been a while since we were here. It was August, I think, last time.
Right.
And we were talking about risk rating 2.0. We'd been on a couple of times, but I think it's important, you know, going into this new year, people think about this and you know, you're going to be making decisions and what have you. And so we wanted to kind of rehash things. There's been a little movement on some of the things FEMA maybe provided. And again, I have concerns with what they provided. It's not entirely forthright and actually presenting the information correctly. And so I wanted to make sure we got a chance to do that, and then maybe later on we'll talk about the lawsuit that's
right.
pending.
That's pending with the transparency that's been requested.
Right.
So, Aaron, let's start with that first slide, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, the second one, that's just an intro slide. But just a reminder, basically in October of 2021, FEMA started this risk rating 2.0 rating methodology. So things have not really changed in a lot of fronts. We basically have the mapping that says whether you need to have flood insurance or you don't need to have flood insurance, and the fact that, you know, if you are in a special flood hazard area and you have a mortgage that it's in any way guaranteed by the federal government, you have to have it. So it's, you know, for all intents and purposes, mandatory for a lot of folks. In October of 1st of 2021, which is some time back now, they started implementing this program for people who never had flood insurance before. So the rating was based off of that. And then April 1st of 2022, for renewals. So by now, April 1st of 2023, actually, everybody should have seen their renewal. And this rating methodology changes rating significantly.
Right.
And I think that it's important for a lot of people to see what's different about it. So maybe the next slide.
Okay. So here are the differences and the changes.
Right. So in what we refer to as the legacy rating method, the legacy rating method is a method they had been using for years and years and years. It basically was based on a 1% annual exceedance probability flood event. So a flood that has greater than a 1% chance in occurring in any given year. We hear it as a 100-year flood.
Right.
And a 100-year flood's not a good way to say it because you could have it multiple times in a 100-year period.
Correct.
But it's a 1% annual exceedance probability. And so you set an elevation, and under the legacy method, if you built above that elevation, then FEMA will have showed you a map. The parishes will have adopted this for floodplain management standards, and you will have built your property above that base flood elevation in order to get a permit to occupy the residence or the building. And in doing so, you have mitigated FEMA's risk of paying a flood claim up to the 1% annual exceedance probability event. That worked.
And it worked very well for many years.
For the ability for a person to be able to understand what they could do to mitigate their risk of flooding and to minimize that risk, and bought flood insurance at a very affordable price. Through a whole host of things, the program finds itself underwater largely with regards to how much money it's taking in versus how much money it's paid for claims, but not just for claims, for all things that it does. It's mapping, it's paying the write your own insurance companies to do different things and to sell the product, and all their costs, administrative costs. So they're trying to say that they need to be more actuarial, and that's what this is for. And but that's counter to what Congress told them to do, right?
Right.
I mean,
it's actually just the opposite.
Right? It is, right. This is not the focus for them in Congress has been on the insurance as compared to the program.
Right.
And I've said it before, the programs benefits to the nation have been that it basically, because of that floodplain management standard we're talking about, it saved the nation $100 billion in avoided flood costs over the last 40 years. And this is FEMA's numbers, right? And it does work. It avoids flooding. But there's no credit for that in considering how much money it's taken in versus how much money it's spent, which is a deficit of about $36 billion, and currently owes $20 billion to the U.S. Treasury, and it's paying it back with interest, insane interest, like $20.5 billion debt to the Treasury. The policyholders are paying back, not rank and file members of the public. The people who hold policies are paying back $1.7 million in interest per day to the U.S. Treasury.
$1.7 million in interest per day.
$619 million per year of what's being paid back to the Treasury is just for interest. And so
so that's at 100 billion versus 40 billion that nobody's looking at.
Right.
We saved you 100, but you spent 40.
Right.
And now we're having to pay it back at an astronomical rate with those particular.
Right. And it becomes a hindrance to the policies, right? So all of our the change in policy,
right.
All of our legislators, and I mean all of them, Scalise, Graves, Higgins, Letlow, Johnson, Carter, right. Everybody, then Kennedy and Cassidy are really working on this. But when you go to score things and you try to make improvements to this, there's no dynamic scoring. So you don't get credit for the $100 billion you saved. Right. They just look at what it might cost you as compared to what it is now. So in any event, it needs reauthorization, needs long-term reauthorization, and our congressional delegation is working on that. The program expires February 2nd.
February 2nd.
The whole thing goes
That's
away
really
again.
Close.
So maybe we move through the slides. A couple of more quick points that I wanted to mention. This is what they're putting out in the average cost per month increase, and it's an intrinsically deceitful way of messaging these things because you don't think of it, and have the opportunity to pay for it on a per month basis. And in typical FEMA fashion, the Homeowners Flood Insurance Affordability Act in 2014. So we're on 10 years now.
10 years, right?
Told FEMA they had 18 months to develop a way to allow people to pay flood insurance on a monthly basis. So maybe this would have made sense then.
10 years ago.
It gave them 18 months in 2014. Some congressmen pushed on it just recently and said, what's the status of this? And their answer is, we're working on it, basically.
So they were given 18 months 10 years ago.
Yeah, 10 years ago, and they still haven't got it done. So next slide, this shows 73% nationally, but 80% in Louisiana going to see it. And Lafourche is 97.2% and Terrebonne 96.1%. People are seeing these huge increases, and they need to be paying attention to this. Next slide. The reason it's difficult to pay attention is when you get your renewal notice, you'll get what your new rate is. And it might have gone up. Well, it would have been limited to 18% increase because statutorily they can't increase it more than 18%. So a lot of people sit back and go, I've been hearing about these increases, but all we really went up was $120 and, everything's going up, so that's good. The problem with that is it will continue to go up year to year. And you really need to be aware of that. So when you get your declaration page, right, you'll get that a couple of weeks after you've paid your renewal. Right. And my high recommendation is do not drop it if you can afford it and you need it. Do not drop it. You need to keep moving with it. But in the declaration page, you will see what your full risk premium will be. In this case, 6,300. I don't remember what this number actually is. 6385 is what you wind up paying when they completely have increased your rate to the full amount. So
it's probably 18% every year.
Right. 18% every year. It goes up very fast. I mean, you're looking at a tripling in 4 years, a quadrupling in 5. By the time you get to 10 years, you're looking at 5 times the annual premium you were paying. I have a next declaration page on the next slide too. You're going to see that they look different, but you'll see what's a full risk premium. And so that's where you're going with this, and it's something to pay attention to. And a final point I'll make about the program and why you need to pay attention is FEMA, and we can drop the slide, is just FEMA has put out some more data, right? They're saying, well, what can we do? Because we're making this case that in the legacy method, we knew we elevate, we save money, we get a better parse. But what can we do? So they put out these sheets that show you how you can get a discount for elevation and stuff like that. And they make it look really good. Without going into too much detail, because it is pretty complicated, what you have in the rating methodology is that they're looking at three broad factors: where it's built. So Louisiana is one thing. Stupid, because it's not all Louisiana is the same, obviously.
Correct.
But distance from a flood source as they perceive it. So you've got the where it's built, you got the how it's built, the type of house it is, the foundation, above grade, distance from the river and the levees and stuff is in the first factor. This is more or less how the house is built as a factor. Right. And then the third thing is what you're buying, how much coverage you're looking for, deductibles and stuff like that. So with those things, they'll tell you that, look, if you elevate your house, you get a 24% discount. That sounds good, but the way it's calculated is subset 1, subset 2, subset 3, and you're only getting a discount on a very small multiplier in the mean. So they'll show it as a percentage, and you won't know what your actual cost is. And you need to ask your agent, if I do this, what will my cost be?
Wow. Some really good information. We're going to continue with that, and we appreciate it. Guys, don't go anywhere. A whole lot more Going Public when we return.
Yep.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough. Alford and Associates, for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality. Terrebonne General Health Systems, modern technology and timeless caring. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bourke, know your rights.
Hello and welcome back to this edition of Going Public. Again, your host, Keith Weissite, licensed clinical social worker. So very glad to have with us Dwayne Bourgeois, who is the North Lafourche Levee District Executive Director. Appreciate you joining us once again.
Sure.
And look, we were going over all of the different ways that FEMA's trying to justify how and what they're doing with this flood rating 2.0. Problem is, it's unlawful in the way that they've done it. And that is, to me, it really burns me up to know that we have to waste dollars to have to sue and have this lawsuit because they just won't be transparent. Right. And that's basically it.
Right. Well,
that's the beginning of it. Sorry.
That's definitely the beginning of it. And a lot of it is a push by Congress. I'm not going to say that Congress is totally, and I don't mean our congressmen or our senators. Right. I mean, we're disproportionately impacted in Louisiana, and that becomes part of our problem. Right. But we were getting nowhere with this. I mean, our congressmen had done everything they possibly could. And so what we did was we pushed, and my board president and I, through the Association of Levee Boards, asked the association to file a lawsuit. We met with then Attorney General Jeff Landry, right, and Liz Murrell, who was his Solicitor General, and we pushed for a lawsuit, which ultimately was filed June 1st, 2023. The lawsuit was filed. Basically 10 states, 44 parishes, 2 18 levee districts, 2 municipalities all joined the suit. So it's people from Louisiana, Florida, Idaho, Kentucky, Mississippi, Montana, North Dakota, South Carolina, Texas, Virginia. So this is we're trying to get the idea that this is a nationwide problem and it needs to be addressed. So the motion for the lawsuit was filed June 1st of last year. A motion for a preliminary injunction was filed on June 14th. So the idea there is that, we're going to go to trial with the suit, but we're being damaged right now. So the idea is to file a preliminary injunction to hopefully get a judge to intervene.
Okay.
And so that was filed. We were looking initially in an August timeframe for a hearing. That got pushed back because I think you've learned from several things we talked about. FEMA's mode of operation is delay.
Right. They can delay, but when they implement something, we have to respond right away.
Right. They came up with this risk rating 2.0. They basically said they worked on it for 5 years. And then from the time they first handed out any information about it to the time it was going to effect was less than 6 months. And that's the problem we have. So we don't have any options. So we basically had a hearing on Thursday, September 14th, Judge Papillon in federal court in New Orleans. And in the hearing, we made our case. Same thing that was basically filed in the lawsuit. So the hearing was to look at basically two things: whether the state had standing, because FEMA basically said that the state didn't have any damage because they're not property owners and things like that. So they didn't have standing. So that was the one issue that was to be addressed, as well as the motion for injunction and the real damages that we were seeing as individuals. So the basic actions of the lawsuit was that it was arbitrary and capricious, that it was a violation of the Administrative Procedures Act, which is a technical process by which legislation and changes that, legislation exists, but the changes in policy that an administrative entity would go through has to follow certain Procedures Act so that it can be determined that it is in accordance with the law that exists. So we feel that it was a violation of that. It exceeded their statutory authority, and therefore was unconstitutional. It was contrary to the law. The law largely says that, you price this insurance at a rate that's reasonable to encourage participation in the program. Right. Why? Because of those benefits that we know that the program had, that the $100 billion in savings over the last 40 years, because people are building and safer. I mean, things were working well. And so the law says that you need to price it affordable. Now, FEMA takes the position that affordability is not their issue. Right. Somehow.
How convenient, right?
Well, right. I mean, somehow they've prioritized actuarial rates and trying to make the program actuarial and collecting all that it does. But again, all of those benefits are not weighed in. And, $36 billion over a 50-year life. I mean, DC spends that in a good afternoon. It's just crazy that we're being so hammered by this. It's clear that this was supposed to be reasonable, that it was supposed to be something that we encourage participation in, but we're seeing participation drop. Right. We're seeing their rating in here, going back to the problems with the program. We're seeing the ratings in here go to where they're totally nonsensical. Right. In areas that we're mapping correctly, and I have to say, when we talked about FEMA, and I don't want to be entirely negative, you've heard me talk about the program in a positive light. That
sure.
$36 billion in saving us $100 billion. We maybe shouldn't be having these crazy discussions. But you also have the FEMA mapping side. Those people work very well with us and are trying to, in a collaborative and cooperative way, make sure that their maps are right. But what used to be a FEMA rate map is now just a FEMA flood insurance requirement map.
Right. It's become a cluster rather than a map. Right. So it's clustering instead of mapping.
So we've got two different things. We've got mapping, which is just looking at how and where the water moves in a very scientific, in a defensible way and a collaborative way. And we're working in Lafourche Parish with our partners in Region 6 to handle those things. We're making good maps, we feel, because we're working collaboratively. And then you got the other side of FEMA where after a disaster, you get disaster relief, and that's challenging to say the least, but it's very well guided, and we know why they're doing what they're doing. And if it costs you this, you get a potential for reimbursement. This right down in the middle, the insurance has been just upside down and inside out for years and years and years. And, all of the attempts at reauthorization, people are just looking at the cost of the program, how much money it owes the federal treasury. And again, it owes the federal treasury. It's not a cost. It's just a debt to the U.S. Treasury.
Right.
But the rest of the treasury benefits from it. So the lawsuit focuses on the technical aspects of what's wrong. The fact that it was arbitrary and capricious. We had so many people relying on grandfathering as a policy. Grandfathering was that if you, in the legacy method, built to the maps that were presented to you at the time, that were in force at the time, you built above that base flood elevation, then even if you were remapped into a higher elevation, you would still be paying a price for flood insurance based off of your original
purchasing,
your original mapping, right? And in doing so, you'd buy good, and you'd buy it at a good price. And the biggest benefit is that you could sell your home to someone who could then continue on the grandfathering path, which preserved the value of the home.
Right.
So again,
affordability.
But it's not just affordability; it's transportability of the policy. The policy stayed with the home, not with the person. Well, in Risk Rating 2.0, they completely eliminated grandfathering, and so you've got in many sections an unfair taking of value of the home. Now, maybe not taking 100% value of the home, but taking of the value, because who's going to buy the home that has this $6,800, $8,000 future premium, right? Because
that they can't afford.
Right. But in the old system, you were protected by grandfathering. So the impacts of that were not considered in the creation of Risk Rating 2.0, which is part of the reason that the lawsuit's going forward.
And so moving forward, let's talk a little bit about, I want to go back to something you said earlier. Don't cancel your policy.
Right.
And the reason is because, much like yourselves and this lawsuit, but the now Jeff Landry governor and the now AG Liz Morrell are going to continue to fight this fight.
Right. And that's the good news for us, right? Things worked out pretty good in that regard. Jeff picked it up, but it was Liz as the Solicitor General in her office that did most of the heavy lifting on the suit. Jeff was obviously there in the middle of it and promoting it. So now with Jeff as the governor and as of Monday, and Liz moving from Solicitor General to Attorney General, I think we've got really good continuity on this lawsuit. I mean, there's good staff. They just named a new Solicitor General, and by all accounts, very, very, very sharp person. Very, I mean, you've got people from LSU Law School saying that I've never seen anybody like this guy. So that's got to have some merit. So I feel good about that. I feel good that Liz is going to keep the pressure on this, and with Jeff's support, and we'll keep going. At this point, Judge Papillon has not made a ruling. We would expect it any day now. Would have expected it already, but it is a big thing, and he's a new judge. Right. So we're hoping to see something come from that. Obviously, no matter what, it's not the end. Right. It's going more or less according to schedule. The problem is the schedule isn't really good for us. It's just what it takes.
With the guideline coming in February.
Right. So
Dwayne, so much great information. Thank you for the recap. if you will, because it's important for people to know. Thank you for the great direction and what we're doing to continue to move forward. And so we know that you'll bring with us more information as we get it.
Right.
from that.
Anything
So we
comes
appreciate
up, I mean, we could wind up, we'll probably wind up in Fifth Circuit, but that's going to be the next steps we'll be looking
the next step. We appreciate it so much. All right, guys, that'll do it for this particular edition of Going Public. Don't go anywhere. A lot more local programming right here on HTV.